Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Planning and Development Board. Just so you're aware, we are now broadcasting on YouTube, I think. Please be aware of that. First item is the evacuation procedure. As usual, we are anticipating any emergency drill tests. So if the alarm sounds, it's likely to be a real event. If you do hear alarm, please leave the nearest safest exit, which is likely to be that door. For any reason you can't, the entrance to the Civic Suite, then I think if you enter the building this evening. Please just don't go home, because we have a record of everyone who's in the room, and we wouldn't wish the emergency services to have to go through a dangerous building finding please, if you do evacuate, go to assembly point G on the just outside those windows. Stay there until Ms. Ryan says it is safe to leave. Agenda item number 2 is a absence on official council business or other reasons, and we have apologies from Councillor Dervix, who is in Sweden, being substituted by Councillor Oakhurst. Welcome back, Councillor Oakhurst.
Thank you, Chair.
Are you all happy to note Councillor Dervix is on?
Thank you.
That is definitely Councillor Barton.
Yes. I'm a shadow of my former self.
I've got my reading glasses on, not my distance
Yes,
ones.
no, my nameplate has disappeared.
Oh, well.
But anyway, I'm here.
Oh, that's good. You're not on holiday then?
No,
Not yet. Agenda item number 5, disposal of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Does that have anything you wish to disclose? Councillor Parsons?
I have a non-pecuniary interest. I serve on Folsworth Parish Council, and the item about the east of the Tamworth Government. So, declaring that I'm serving on the Parish Council, and we haven't discussed it.
Thank you. Thank you. And
the item number 5H is my property, so I'll leave this room in discussion.
thank you.
Okay.
Any other interest members? Then we move on to the minutes of the board held on the 12th of June. Are you happy that I signed the minutes as a true and correct record?
So moved.
Thank you much. All those in favour? Thank you. We now move on to the planning applications for determination. The first one is number 188 for land at Tamworth Road, Gloucester. Mr. Brown, anything to add to your report?
Not the report, Mr. Chairman. I will go through the slides, however, because it's easier perhaps to see them on the screen that is replicated on the page in front of you. The site here is outlined in red, as you can see on the screen. Substantial area south of Dosthill in Tamworth. The A51 is here on the left. Rush Lane is the southern boundary and also the eastern boundary. The Honeybeck premises are the ones here in the left. But you can see the site here extends up here by the railway line, and that in fact is in sorry, Mr. Chairman, the slides are not coming through on my screen. I don't know what you see on yours.
Then, Mark. Okay. You said the slides not coming through on that screen. Are they coming through on your?
They are.
Yeah.
Pictures are on the report anyway.
They are. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. You can see there the divide between Tamworth and North Warwickshire. The two applications, one bit submitted to Tamworth and the one to us, which is on the green portion of that particular site. Then in terms of the parameters plan, which the applicant has proposed, you can see the two zones being suggested, Zone A and Zone B, both south of the access road onto the A51 and the green infrastructure surrounding the site. The application or the applicant is putting forward options or alternative layouts within those parameters. Units 1, 2 and 3 facing the road, the unit 4 behind is on that particular option. And then option 2 is again 4 units, but with a very large unit 4, as you can see, on the east side of the development. The land within Tamworth, the green land here, the green corridor of land here, in fact, remains as green in either option. And as you saw on the parameters plan, that is still the case. The report, Mr. Chairman, runs through the background. It's a description of the application as submitted. The relevant development plan policies are in there. And the recommendation, as you can see, is to note receipt of the report. But as members may wish, in fact, to visit the site, given the fact it's a fairly substantial development on its boundary, and we are expecting representations from the residents up here. In the development here, although that's in the first run of houses there is North Warwickshire, the bulk of that, however, is in Tamworth. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Members, any comments or questions? Councillor Humphries.
Chair, I was going to say, is there any indication, I was trying to pick up here, of how many heavy goods vehicle moves there will be? Because that's not a very nice road. They're either coming up from the Two Gates lights or you're to come up through Kingsbury. So I'd be interested to see how many vehicle moves they may anticipate. Thank you.
The site, Mr. Chairman, as you're aware, and as indication of the board, benefits from a planning commission in any event for B1, B2 and B8 uses. Therefore, HGV uses could be anticipated. The transport assessment with the application doesn't give us any figures, but clearly that will come forward when the consultation response comes back from the County Council's Highway Authority. The initial indication from the applicant in speaking to them is that traffic will in fact be run south to through Kingsbury to the motorway system and strategic road network that way, rather than go through Dosthill and use the A5.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I know that the application is only for note, so I'd just like to note my concerns. This is in my ward. It's just right on the edge of my ward. I'm concerned again for the residents and any noise they're going to get from this application. And I too am concerned about the traffic, especially as I don't live in Kingsbury, but I sit on Kingsbury Parish Council, and I'm concerned about the amount of traffic going down through Kingsbury and coming up through Kingsbury. I know there's a lot of concern in Kingsbury when they were doing the landfill site and the traffic that passed through then. And I'm also concerned, as I told you before, about the use of Rush Lane and any vehicles going up into Whateley, which is totally unsuitable for any heavy vehicles, and it's hardly passable. Well, it's passable in a car, but you're difficult to pass up there. And we all know that the HGV drivers tend to get lost or tend to close their eyes and follow the sat nav, and I'm sure that any sat nav would want to take you up that lane to Trinity Road and turn left down onto the M42, which would be a lot closer than going all the way through Kingsbury. So they're my concerns. So certainly Rush Lane is a real problem. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Ms. Mayor, you take those issues on board in the application. Councillor Hayfield.
Given the concerns that are being raised and things, a deferral for a site visit does seem a sensible way forward, and I'll propose.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips.
Just because it's something we thought about in our last ended. Are there any intentions to put solar panels on the roof of the yes.
This site is very close to that, within a kilometre to the east on the other side of the road. As you can see, Mr. Chairman, this is brownfield land, former Utica colliery site. It's not in the green belt. Therefore, the agricultural arguments which were mentioned by the board last time do not carry weight, and therefore there is no objection from my point of view to the proposal.
Thank you, members. Any comment? Mr. Brown, one concern that I'll raise is given the proximity of this site to the ones approved and other ones which may be approved in the future is as regards aggregation. Is there any concern in that regard from your viewpoint?
If the board wants to have that, Mr. Chairman, then certainly do so. I mean, making the representations to the Borough Council, to Nuneaton. Nuneaton will be aware of the consent just to the west. They were consulted on that particular application. But I can make, if the board wishes me to add that comment, I certainly can do.
Thank you. I think in your observations to the biodiversity and ecology enhancements that would be of benefit as the green corridors extend into the Warwickshire, I'm just not sure how effective that will be as a green corridor.
Well, Mr. Chairman, there is woodland on either side of Aston Lane, particularly from the road Woodlands Lane, which is to the top there on that particular plan. There's significant green infrastructure on both sides of that road and hedgerow connections into North Warwickshire as a consequence of that.
They're already there.
They're already there, Mr. Chairman. Yes, but if there's enhancements on this particular site, it means that there will be enhancement of those links and those connections into North Warwickshire, because they already exist. Therefore, the biodiversity value of those particular assets will be improved.
Okay, so members, if you're a question to Nuneaton regarding intensification and, if you like, particularly connectivity to the grid. Councillor Dunn.
Chairman, it's a technical question really. Just going back to what you were saying about there being a number of similar sites, either approved or maybe approved in the area. Is this something that would be welcome from a technological point of view to gather these sites together, or is it something that causes a problem? I'm just asking a question for future reference, so that in the future, if one's approved, then it's good to have lots of them and attract others. Or the reverse. I don't know the answer.
Councillor Ryan?
It was a question or a statement, Chair, not an answer to Councillor Bell's.
Mr. Brown?
As members are aware from previous solar farm applications, it's the point of connection which is the key issue here. And this is the reason why we've had three, in fact now four, this part of the borough, to get the same connection which this one would use. So therefore, if there's the capacity within that substation and a nearby substation, then the solar farm proposals will follow on, which is why they've not happened elsewhere, because there's no capacity in the other substations that are applicable in the borough.
So it is likely, sorry, I just got it. So it is likely that that they may cluster together, these applicants.
Councillor Riley?
This question is about conditions that were on the brownfield site. And essentially, I'm just looking to explore whether there was a condition of restoration on the site after its life as a colliery. And I think that is a consideration for this board. Because if we do have brownfield sites that have got restoration conditions on them, then, as I sit here today, my expectation is that those sites would be restored to the status that they were after the function that required restoration was completed. In this application, if there was a condition of restoration, it seems that Nuneaton and Bedworth might have an issue to consider about not delivering previous condition, or indeed from this board's perspective, our need to consider those conditions going forward. Because really, if you looked at it in this application in a rational way, you would say yes, use a brownfield site. However, if it had been restored, then I think that changes the position. That makes sense, Mr. Moore.
I think there almost certainly wasn't a restoration condition when the colliery started. but from memory, didn't all quarries during at a certain date have restaurant? I'm trying to remember the issues at Door Mill. At Door Mill, a restoration condition was imposed after the event, and I thought that was a national issue, Mr. Brown.
There was, Mr. Chairman, but in this particular site, the site has been restored, as indicated in the report. It's now semi-mature grassland. Has been restored, and the spore heap, as I say in the report, been retained in order to enable skylarks to nest on that particular site. So it has been restored. What you'll see from the report is that the panels will be located obviously on the grassland. There is additional biodiversity and ecological strengthening throughout the site and off-site, and that they are arguing that in fact that there will be a greater biodiversity and ecological asset as a consequence of this application and its associated detail, the existing site which is left.
Thank you for that comprehensive answer. I suppose the application just makes me think then as we go forward about sites where we talk about restoration post a temporary use, whether we need to give further thought as we move forward into, is this restoration plus?
Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's very much similar to what Councillor Riley has said, because I was reading through that restored to low-grade agricultural land. I know and aware that it's Nuneaton and Bedworth, and I guess I was trying to get some reassurance that the land will be returned to some kind of farmland in the future after this solar farm is completed. I'm just seeking that reassurance by the Chairman.
Mr. Brown.
It's normal, Mr. Chairman, for there to be a restoration condition after decommissioning. We did so on the 3 applications that we dealt with recently, and I'll anticipate Nuneaton will do the same here, but if the board wishes, Mr. Chairman, they can always be reminded.
Thank you.
I'd be grateful for that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Jay. It's a bit of a technical issue, really. I'm just wondering if we could have some sort of technical paper or some instruction on the connectivity issue, because the connectivity issue seems to come up whenever we're talking about one of these sites, and we're told that it has to be here because of the connectivity. And quite honestly, I haven't got a clue, and I don't think any of us have really. I wonder if we could have perhaps some sort of technical input on what is the nature of the connectivity, and what has to be there and what has not to be there in order for this to be sort of considered. Because essentially, we're just taking this on trust, really. I'm not sure we should be. So I'm just asking if we could perhaps have something about the connectivity issue, which gives us at least some understanding of the technical issues there.
A good question, Councillor Parsons. On an application, I think, Astley, a couple of meetings ago, there was an appendix that got a lot of that in. But I accept the point that was from an applicant rather as a generality. Mr. Brown, have you had connectivity training?
You'll see the answer to that from the Mr. Chairman. So the answer. As you point out, there was a very detailed appendix attached to the last report, and in fact, in all the 3 cases that we had, and the 4th one which is outstanding, the applicant has provided the evidence of the capacity for each of the substations. Well, there's the one substation which is in Bedworth here that there is. But I can do my best, Mr. Chairman, is all I can say, because it's a technical issue.
I think it is important because this issue will come. As a starter, circulate that response, and then we can look at seeing if we can get somebody from the electricity industry to come and explain that to us.
Yeah. Yes.
Councillor Ridley.
I agree with Councillor Parsons, really. I really haven't got a clue about, we know that they've got to be in a certain location, who's access to the grid, so I've gathered that much. But they talk about restoration and how much concrete is put into these things in order to sort of stabilise them and get them all sorted out and avoid the winds. How green are they, effectively? That would also be, I've never been to a solar farm. I don't know if there's access to one that we could perhaps as a board have a look at, see what the sustainability is like. It's all very well looking at it up on a piece of paper, but certainly access to one or the workings of one would be great. I don't know if it's viable, but then we can actually say, yeah, this is sustainable or this is sustainable, or certainly about putting solar panels on top of buildings. I don't know why we're not pushing for that really, covering all our greenfield solar panels, but.
Thank you. We'll certainly take all that into the same point and try and find out what more we can get. Councillor Humphries.
I was just thinking earlier, when one of the people that supplied earlier was Ultima, that provided all the substations in the area, and every one of them was at red. And I'm just thinking, this is outside our area, but we can make comment on it. I believe there's another one going to come in Kersley, just down the road. And if you think about the one that's going through the process in Tamworth, next to the lakes, I know it's a bit further away, it's 3.5 times bigger than anything else looked at. Still got to end up the grid somewhere, still on a very close proximity to our substation. So I think it is necessary. There must be a point when, if everything's in the red, it's going to come to an end sooner or later. Thank you.
I think we have a site visit coming up for a further site shortly as well. Councillor Gosling.
Just obviously I've raised before, I feel quite strongly that we should have some sort of policy in place to our climate change. We've raised it at full council, we've raised it in planning previously. Do Nuneaton have such a policy? Get Nuneaton applications for similar issues. Do they have something that we can maybe learn from and adapt or take on board, or have a look to? Is there a design champion for solar farms for their jurisdiction?
Question, Mr. Brown, do you know?
I'm afraid I don't know, Mr. Chairman, offhand, but clearly I can let Councillor Gosling and members of the board know once I've looked through the Nuneaton local plan. As far as we're concerned, in our local plan, then there is a policy. That's the current policy, and I'll give you the number, Mr. Chairman, so that members can be able to look at it. LP 35, it says there renewable energy projects will be supported where they respect the capacity and sensitivity of the landscape and communities to accommodate them, landscape agricultural and things like that. So there is a policy, LP 35, in the local plan, but I can compare it with anything that might be in the legal, Mr. Chairman.
I think that's a fair answer, Mr. Brown. I suspect Councillor Gosling would want to go a bit further than that and put some more meat on the bones. And I think, given that we've agreed that we're looking at a review of the plan, great opportunity to make sure we roll that in. But I'll take your point. You know, if other local authorities have a policy that we can deal with and try, it's up to how it works together. Members, any other comments? I can't remember now at my age. Did we have a proposal that it was? I think the proposal will be that we have no objection in principle, but the officers raise the matters that we've all raised in part of the debate with Nuneaton Borough Council. I'll propose that from the chair. Is there a seconder? Can I see all those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move on to application number 606 for 22 Church Lane, Middleton. Councillor Keegan, I know that you're registered to speak. If you could stand by while Mr. Brown introduces his report. Mr. Brown.
Right, thank you. I'll just run through the slides again. The site there, as you can see, is outlined in red, a semi-detached property on the north side of Church Lane in the village of Middleton. And the application is for a small building at the rear, as you can see there. This was the original proposal that came in. The front elevation there was the key concern of a lot of representations, particularly the large window on both sides of the door. That was the rear. This is now the current proposal, the amended scheme. Sorry, beg your pardon, that's the original proposal. You see there, goes on either side. This is the amended scheme, and you can see that on the left-hand side of the door, there's now a high-level, low-depth window, but the window on the other side remains, and that's, as you can see, for the toilet. the information, Mr. Chairman, that we asked for has been submitted. In other words, a reason why the house could not be extended, and that's included as one of the appendices to the report. The last time the board asked for a site visit, that was undertaken a few weeks ago, and a report of that, Mr. Chairman, is at Appendix B, when 4 or 5 members turned up and had a good look at the site. The notes of that are, as I say, attached to Appendix B, and the applicant's response to the request about alternatives is at Appendix C. As you see from the report, Mr. Chairman, I don't consider there to be a planning reason for refusal. There's been a lot said about non-planning in connection with this application, and those are mentioned in the report. But I'd ask members to deal with this on its planning merits and make a determination accordingly, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. So can you just draw my attention to the first item you talked about, which was the explanation as to what the particular notes of the application were?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Appendix E, it's the planning statement by Insight Surveyors on page 5D/87.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor Keegan, welcome to the meeting of the Planning and Development Board.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Ms. Ryan will explain the rules relating to public speaking to you, but you are welcome, very welcome to the meeting. Ms. Ryan, over to you.
Yes, well, you have 3 minutes actually spent. Start the clock ticking, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute left.
Thank you. Okay, do I start now? First of all, thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak on behalf of Middleton parishioners. My name is Jill Keegan, and as a parish councillor in Middleton for over 15 years, I cannot recall so many objections or strength of feeling ever being raised against a single planning application as this one. I believe, therefore, I speak for the majority of residents. Our sole focus is on planning considerations, and we believe our favoured approach of an extension to the main house will solve the key issues of 1, design, 2, loss of privacy, and 3, threat to the environment, which is garden development. So first, design issues. It is not accepted that the reasons for rejection of an extension to the house as an option are substantiated. It has been assumed that an extension with the capacity of the dwelling will be required, whereas in fact only 1 additional room would be required. This equates to an extra bedroom and stroke living quarters, not independent accommodation. Objections to moving propane gas bottles is not a significant issue, as many households in the village have done this very thing. Although many properties have extensions, conservatories built in front of lounge kitchen windows, that is not a valid reason to discount this option. And in any case, with a smaller footprint, this may not even apply. We therefore request that this extremely viable option is given further serious investigation. Second, loss of privacy. A separate dwelling, specifically that overlooking the back bedrooms of neighbouring properties. This very real objection apparently had been overcome by a quote, changed all glazing to be obscured glazing to the front elevation. This does not negate open windows, doors for that matter, or are they to be fixed? This could introduce potential problems of damp, exit risks in case of fire, and general well-being in a property with no views, front or back. Nor does it negate the potential to have the obscure glass changed out in future. Had the council taken professional advice on the potential impact of such a design element on the individual concerned? The third is the threat to the environment. The proposed garden development takes up a considerable portion of the garden space, 30%, in an already small garden area. This has an impact on the environment for both the family and neighbours. It also sets a precedent for garden development. Clearly, a need has been identified to support a member of this family, and while sympathetic to that need, we do not agree that resorting the garden development and the subsequent impact of that is the answer, and indeed will likely create future problems. Rather than shoehorning the family into a property clearly now unsuitable for their needs, surely the council's first consideration should be given to the relocation family into an already built, suitably sized property. Building this dwelling is not an answer to a situation which is only going to get worse. A suggestion of extension to the house is what we are proposing.
Thank you, Councillor Keegan. Members, do you
Thank
have
you.
questions? Councillor Hunt, sorry, Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened to the objections that come from Middleton Parish Council. Can I ask, are there any conditions that the Parish Council would consider would be acceptable on this application, or is their position one of outright objection?
If you mean for the proposal of a separate dwelling at the bottom of the garden, then I think the objections I've already said, and our preferred option would be an extension to the house.
Yeah.
It's mostly, as I said, loss of privacy.
Any other questions? There are no other questions, so thank you very much, Councillor Keegan.
Oh, thank you.
Members, any comments or questions? Proposal. Councillor Hunt.
Just making a statement, comment here of the insight surveyors, and in the conclusion it says provide the required alteration, reduce overcrowding. Have they not seen the site they have produced the overcrowding? Because I know it's a big shed, and it is only a shed, and it needs to be much improved on that. But this young man isn't living full time in the house anyway. And I take it as a result of that, what overcrowding they're going to reduce. So, you know, I'd like to know how the family's living. Thank you.
Mr. Brown.
Well, I don't know specifically the answer to that question, Mr. Chairman, but on the site visit, for the benefit of those members that didn't attend, we were shown a wooden shed in which this particular child sleeps.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors Watson and Smith did intend to come to planning board tonight. They are the local councillors from Middleton. However, this meeting has clashed with Curdworth Parish Council, where there are significant considerations around HS2 to be discussed tonight. When I discussed the application with them, I share their views, and their views very much do support the Parish Council in this application in terms of having concerns about loss of privacy, having concerns about the proximity of this development in the Greenbelt, and favouring a response that would be an extension to the property. However, they also understand that the application before us is not for an extension, it is for a separate dwelling. If that is the case, and an extension is not for the existing building, is not to be considered tonight, then Councillor Watson and Smith both very much support conditions on the building that would be around its designated use for one individual by name, and also a condition of removal of the structure should that individual cease to use the building for the purposes that are outlined in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brown, can you draw our attention to the conditions which are going to be applied? Because I can see on page 77 or 87 of 233 the recommendation as set out in Appendix A. The recommendation I can see in Appendix A, page 90 of 233, has 4 conditions. Are those the conditions proposed?
The 4 conditions set out on page 5D are the ones that were originally recommended when the application first came to the planning board. And condition 4 reads, the accommodation hereby approved should be occupied solely in connection with auxiliary to the main dwelling, 22 Church Lane, and shall not be sold off, sublet, or used as a separate unit of accommodation. And then on the current report, Mr. Chairman, in the recommendation, I've suggested that condition 2 needs to be updated to take account of the amended plan, and also either within condition 2, a separate condition, removal of the building following the vacation of the property.
So So the conditions will need to be amended.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as recommended.
Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether that condition can be about accommodation by the family, can be further strengthened to name an individual, because clearly one member of the family could move out of the building, second member could move in who didn't have the needs of the proposed occupant, and we end up with a situation of a building that becomes a permanent structure.
Thank you.
I was going to say something similar, really, not just that it's only for this family, but it's only for that person, because I think a lot of these conditions are about trying to protect ourselves, as it were, as a precedent for future developments like this, which we don't normally look on very favourably. I agree, first of all, that we can't sort of consider the option of an extension, because that's not what we've got before us. We've got this is the application, and whilst it could be problematic, I do think that we have to take real concern about these special circumstances, the very special circumstances of one member of the family. So in some way, I mean, so therefore, because of those special circumstances, I am willing to, but I would like to see the conditions strengthened even more, so that it is about that very special circumstance around that special person, and that is why we've agreed. And if that person is no longer resident there, to consider.
It is difficult to consider an application subject to conditions when you have conditions to review. Ms. Ryan, my understanding of conditions is not always that effective. And if someone were to come into this house, acquire it, and then live in it, and they wish to retain that building, they simply have to show planning policy had not changed, to be able to retain that ended property.
I think maybe Mr. Brown would be better placed to answer that.
Are you still connected?
Legal training.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be able to bring. I know what you're saying about breach of conditions, and so we would be able to have an officer go out and attend and do an investigation, take enforcement action if that was appropriate.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Brown, how could we enforce a condition accepting that another applicant could apply to retain that use?
I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Chairman. I can hear the comments from members. If you're prepared to do so, I will take legal advice, Head of Legal Services, on the possible wording of a condition relating to the personal circumstances. Now, that is very unusual, as you're aware. Personal circumstances are not usually a material planning consideration. They may well be in this case. Weights that we've given to those already indicates the reason for the grant of approval in any event. So therefore, I'm quite prepared to review that in conjunction with the Head of Legal Services to see in fact if we can put it won't be a named individual. It may be which I can clear with yourself, Vice Chairman, and the Leader of the Opposition, if you're satisfied with that.
I'm certainly happier. The whole reason for granting consent of this application on this location are the personal circumstances. I just want to be sure that we are safe in doing that. Councillor Wiley.
Thank you to Mr. Brown for taking the advice. But can I just ask, does that mean we will not determine the application tonight then, pending Mr. Brown's taking the advice? Because that would affect how I chose to vote on this application. My personal view, Councillor Riley, well, it's really a matter of the board to what you wish to decide on or not. My instinct is the nature of the condition and legal strength is germane to the issue. So I would feel motivated for guidance. But it's your call now. In which case then I propose, Chair, that this application be deferred pending the legal advice.
Councillor Farrell.
Thank you. Listening to Councillors Bell and Riley and taking this all in, I would welcome a proposal that we do have this deferment for the various conditions and requests on legal advice that is sought. So yes, I propose that we do defer this or support the proposal.
Councillor Hopkins?
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if it would be able to be, there should be some specifics about the time that it can last for, rather than if the person's not available. If you're not allowed to use the specific person, can you use a certain time frame? Maybe.
I think that's another alternative that the condition could look at for sure. Councillor Parsons?
Yeah, I'd like to support what Councillor Riley has said and Councillor Bell actually. I mean, the circumstances of the visit weren't totally easy, and it's not an easy case to determine. But I really do feel that the issue of the individual is absolutely perfect. And I think for the, this is a planning reason, isn't it, in that sense, but for the sort of the sense of the community and the neighbourhood, that this is an entirely sensible condition. I would support it.
Thank you. Members, so we've had a proposal for deferment for further information. It's been proposed and seconded. Can I see those in favour of deferment? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. So, members, we'll now move on to application number 298 for Southview Weddington Lane Cul-de-sac. Mr. Christopher Wellsworth, you indicated you'd like to speak. Yes, I'm about to propose deferment of the item, but as you're here and you've come quite a way to get here, I genuinely would like to give you the opportunity to either speak now or not speak when it comes back to the board.
Could I please speak when it comes back to the board after? Because the one point I would make is that when we looked at this last year, we agreed to come at that stage of deferment to have a site visit, and I wasn't aware of any site visit. So what I would like to do, Chair, subject to members' viewpoints, is obviously allow the members to come and visit the site again from our perspective, and then defer it, then speak after we've had a chance to see if that's acceptable to you.
That's absolutely acceptable. Ms. Walford, you can speak now and again next time. You have 3 minutes at any meeting. We wouldn't restrict you to just one, so you can have two goes, or wait until we come back.
I'll give you an overview, Chair, if I may, if that's acceptable.
And to do that, surprisingly, Ms. Ryan has got
mine as well.
Remind you of the rules on public speaking. Councillor Parsons.
Just Chair. We have already had a site visit to this property, have we not?
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
Mr. Brown?
We have had two site visits, Councillor.
I take it.
Mr. Welford is quite correct. When this was deferred the last time, the resolution was to have a further site visit, and that has not yet taken.
Thank you.
Mr. Welford, so the rules on speaking, Ms. Ryan?
You've got 3 minutes to speak. I will set the clock going when you start to speak. Let you know when you've got 1 minute left.
Thank you. Good evening, members. I was disappointed to read the plan officer's report. I couldn't identify any information related to any discussions between the plan officer and the applicant regarding my previous objections. It does not appear to me to be 100% accurate. For example, it states the loss of the whole of the first floor, which is incorrect. The report appears to me to mirror the previous earlier version with limited changes. I feel the points that I'm making are not being listened to or fully considered despite the objective evidence I have submitted. I have a number of concerns. It appears to me that you're allowed to construct large-scale permanent buildings without seeking planning permission. If you identify planning breaches and raise them with authority, they appear to be ignored. You can undertake works on a tree with an order, but there appears to be no consequences. Enforcement notices to stop work are issued, but they are ignored. There doesn't appear to be any requirement to submit accurate planning drawings which comply with the authority's policies. While planning drawings are submitted, you can appear to ignore them and build something else. There appears to be no concern that building regulations being fully complied with. Retrospective plan approval is refused. It appears no enforcement action is taken. then when minor changes are made to a planning application, planning approval is recommended despite there being no detailed information to assess the impact of the changes, for example, overshadowing. My experience in managing regulatory functions at board level in the UK over the last 23 years indicates to me that the assessment of this planning application does not comply with best regulatory practice. I believe the planning report does not provide the board with objective evidence. For example, the estimated floor area of the old garage and shed was circa 80 square metres. The estimated new area in absolute terms is circa 300 metres, a 229% increase. To put this into context, the floor area of the average four-bedroom detached house in the UK is 147 square metres. Some of my family and friends who work in the construction sector have said that based on these facts, the recommendation to approve the planning application is questionable. I believe there are enough red flags to challenge the transparency and objectivity of the planning assessment process. HMRC assessed people organisations on 3 criteria: innocence, carelessness and intent. Given the number of issues identified in my concerns, it appears to me that there are more than innocent mistakes being made. Therefore, because of my concerns, I'm following issues with other bodies, for example, Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service. I would also have to ask whether the issues I've raised in my previous submissions indicate a wider systematic failure in the planning assessment process. I'm not confident, based on my review of the report, that the planning board have had all the evidence to make an independent, objective decision. I wonder whether the handling of this case sets precedence when people consider applying for planning permissions. I personally feel that I've done something wrong for challenging the report. The direct consequence has had an impact on my mental fitness and well-being, directly causing me stress and anxiety. And finally, as an individual who has high personal standards and integrity, I am placing my trust and faith in the planning board members to do the right thing and to reject the planning officer's recommendations. And I'm sorry, Chair, I was slightly over.
Thank you very much. I noticed that you did increase the pace a bit.
Sorry, nervousness.
Members, I am going to propose deferment. Do any of you have any questions at this point from Mr. Walker? No? Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
So, members, as you've heard, I'd like you to defer this question of sharing information with the applicant, and also we haven't had a partner as previously. So I think, in fairness to all parties, we should defer and come back to this at the next meeting. But I'll formally propose deferment. And can I see those in favour of deferment? That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. We'll move on now to application number 248 for 1415 Tannery Close, Atherstone, for 2 trees in the conservation area. Anything to add, Mr. Brown?
No, Mr. Chairman, just to say that Atherstone Town Council have got no objection, and also that the Assistant Director of Leisure and Community Development is quite comfortable about looking at replacement trees.
I think you preempted my question there. That's not very sporting of you. Members, can anyone find anything from the question Mr. Brown now? He's tried to answer all our questions. Councillor Ridley.
Right, do we know why the trees died?
I understand it is due to vandalism from local residents.
Councillor Phillips. Any other questions, members? So, accepting that we're going to agree with felling and replacement, can I see all those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Application number 755 for land to the east of the former Tamworth Golf Course. Anything to add, Mr. Brown?
No, Mr. Chairman, it's an updated report. We've had a significant meeting with the applicants a couple of weeks ago, and an agreed note of that attached as one of the appendices. As this is application has been in for a little while, and there are new members on the board, I know the plans are included in the papers, but I'll just run through these. As you can see, it's a substantial area of land to the east of Tamworth. The former Tamworth Golf Course is here, and that's now almost fully developed as residential development. The boundary with Tamworth is this line here. The M42 is there, obviously in the B5000 with the rail, West Coast Railway out there. The allocation is on the west side of Roby's Lane. This is the land that's in the strategic gap, and the access down here is the land which is in Tamworth. And in terms of the overall layout, that's what's being suggested at the current time. The houses, as you can see, spread out throughout the site. This line here, in fact, is the utility lines, overhead pylons, which is why that corridor is there. There's a school here, a community hub here. The access is from here, with Roby's Lane becoming a traffic light access, and the lane itself being closed from this point up to here, just for pedestrian and cycle access, with the loop going through this side of the development. This land here is playing fields, not just for the school, but for other facilities as well, and there's substantial areas of green space, as you can see outlined throughout the site. The Alfcote Woods, the ancient woodland there. I don't think, no, that's right, Mr. Chairman, that's the last one, that's the last slide. As you can see, the recommendations, Mr. Chairman, that we continue with the meetings as appropriate with the applicants and representatives of the board. At some stage, following a previous resolution, we will meet with officers and members of the Tamworth Borough Council, and that in this particular case, as it's a significant site and several of the issues that were raised at the meeting, we feel that it's important that board members actually visit the site.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Members, any comments or proposals? Councillor Parsons.
I have raised this matter with Polesworth Council, wanting to put in a submission. I don't know whether a submission has been received or indeed if it should have been received at this stage. I basically paraphrased the presentation that the developers gave, and left the council to make their decision in terms of their response. I have got grave objections to the.
Can I just?
Yes, you
haven't done an objection.
Sorry, no, I have got grave concerns. Thank you, Chair. Concerning the development in the strategic gap. 240 houses, reason being to forward. It does actually mention there are other ways of funding this road, and they're not being looked at. The strategic gap is a very important to my community, which feels itself very much under pressure in it from a number of directions. We don't feel the protection we feel pressure, and that is where the community is. As I say, my concerns movement into the strategic gap, and I will obviously have to keep all services. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Mr. Brown, can you ensure that we take all of those comments from Councillor Parsons to heart and address them as we go through the application?
They will be, Mr. Chairman. Just to point out to Councillor Parsons that the Parish Council email has come through. It's obviously not reported here because this is not a determination report.
Yeah, fine.
And so the points that the Parish Council makes, Mr. Chairman, together with those that Councillor Parsons make, will appear in the determination report when that comes before the board.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Cook.
I thought Councillor Rod before me, but I don't mind.
Always happy to follow council.
Oh, thank you very much.
That's all we do first.
I just want to echo that my concerns too are the same as Councillor Parsons. I have concerns. It would be nice to see a plan that doesn't use the strategic gap. And again, I echo Councillor Parsons' concerns about the road. That seems to be that we have to pay for the road by looking at the strategic gap. And I just say I won't go any further. I just wanted to echo those concerns.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Wyman.
Thank you. I support Councillor Parsons and Councillor Phillips and their concerns around the strategic gap. My first request, Chair, is if we do vote to go on a site visit, can we please go to the new developments at Polesworth, where there are 150 new buildings, and just give ourselves a sense of perspective about what 100 looks like. Because from what I know, this application proposal includes 245, I think it is, applications within the strategic gaps. So by going to Polgrove first and seeing what 150 houses looks like, that'll give us some context about the extension. I think that I will also benefit from a site visit of thinking on that site visit about where community facilities should be placed. This is a significant development, and it does include in the outline proposals community centres, potentially a health centre, and there has to be a consideration of the site of the layout of the site where those facilities would be best located.
Thank you very much. All very reasonable points, I think. Any other items that you'd like to raise at this stage? In which case, then, could I propose that we note the report and agree for a site visit along with the other elements of the recommendation? Proposing the recommendations. Second. Thank you very much. And those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you all very much. We now move to application number 135 for 14 Newbrook Close, Wall Street. So, Mr. Brown, anything to add to your report?
Nothing to add to the report, Mr. Chairman. Let me just show the pictures on the screen. That's the site in red at Newbrook Close, which in fact is a cul-de-sac just off Bishopscleeve, and you can see it's in the built-up area. Photographs taken a little while ago, but that's the as existing fence. You can see that alongside the drive of the neighbouring property, and also along the front at the back of the pavement with the gate in there. So that was a little while ago, Mr. Chairman. As you can see from the report, we've asked for changes. This now will involve some planting, which is I know it's very small writing on the left-hand side, but that's included there. And also the applicant has agreed to stain the fence, and that's indicated on the right-hand side of that particular slide. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, Mr. Brown, I can't see the staining.
It does. It says to be stained a dark brown colour.
Thank you. Members, any comments? Councillor Humphrey.
Chair, I've been asked by some of the residents of that road to actually talk about this in terms of that site was open plan gardens. That house has had extensions which actually reversed the way the house was, because that was all front garden at one stage, and the extension, the garage is an extension which they're building on. People in the road obviously understand about people's privacy, etc., but they want the village, the whole area, to look as it should be rather than sticking out like a carbon ball. And I think they would like the height of the fence reduced. I'm amazed that one of the neighbours who has mentioned to me about the height of the side fence actually creating issues when coming off the drop, but they haven't made a complaint except they spoke to me. And I'm concerned about visual displays, because normally, 2.4 metres back to turn left, 47 metres, you're just going to see a 2.4 high wall. I've spoke to Mr. Brown about that and said the sidewalk fences would be allowed under any development, so that's not a point. I think we should have a site visit to actually see it. It sticks out in the photographs, and people may say, I don't think you need a site visit, because you can see how obtrusive it is in terms of how the visuality of it. But I would like to propose a site visit and everybody can see and then make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Bickle.
I consider myself more of a hedge hugger than a tree hugger, but I do always like green replaced with green, and I get the fact that a fence is a practical solution, but it doesn't equate with replacing green for green effectively. Perhaps I don't know what the planting is going to be, but maybe some laurel or something that can be kept, and it looks so harsh.
Thank you.
Just when we're talking like for like, can we please not replace it with modern landline? Save us from any more landline, please.
So members, we've had a proposal to defer for a site visit. I have the same view with that. Applicant is closely related to that. I think that's I see those in favour of the deferment first. Thank you very much. I think that's unanimous. I know it's normal sport to keep the member waiting for half an hour while we pretend that we're still deliberating, but could you? Oh, well, thank you. Members, we now move to application number 371 for land farm Lindridge Road. Anything to add to your report?
Let me just run through the slides first, Mr. Chairman. That's the application site as at present. The triangular piece of land is in North Warwickshire. The extension here westwards is in Birmingham, and that accommodates the road referred to in the report. The A38 and the M612 are here, as you can see. Again, that's referred to in the report with the water treatment works outlined here on the top of the screen. Apologise for the banner across there, Mr. Chairman, but the aerial photograph there shows you that in context. The original site is in North Warwickshire, edged in red. You can see the road network here, Lindridge Road here, and the slope, which I'm referred to in the report, is down from here, goes from here down into Sutton. The land here on the southern side of Lindridge Road is included in the Langley Urban Extension, Sustainable Urban Extension, which is referred to. The further plans show that in a bit more detail. The triangular piece of land that we're talking about is here, right up on the top in the white area here. This is the Lindridge Road, and you can see the extent of the Langley Sue for the 5,500 houses in Birmingham to the south of that particular road. The reason I've included this, Mr. Chairman, to show the size of the site in connection with, in comparison with the size of the Langley Sue. Also, to show the connections. This is the green connection that runs through on the Langley Brook, and the Langley Brook runs here on the application site. And when we get onto the layout, you'll see the connection there. There's also a green connection here on the west side of the A8, which will run through there. And this in fact is pedestrian access, and you'll see that there. In terms of the highway works, and as I indicated, highway works in Birmingham to improve access and connectivity along this part of Lindridge Road, and the crossing down here to get into the facilities, not only on the Langley Sue, but currently on Sutton are there. Again, Mr. Chairman, this is a phasing, so you can put it into context. The site is up here. This triangular piece of land here, and as you can see, the indicative phasing strategy for the Langley Sue in years 1 to 5, the red areas are in 1 to 5, and there's a block here, as you can see. The application site is here. Next phasing 5 to 10, the second block on the south side. In terms of the proposed layout, then you can see here, Mr. Chairman, that the layout as has been submitted. The connection with the Langley Brook here.
That goes the A38 speaking. As a AI.
Oh, well, there's something on it.
Sorry, if I could,
TV.
Yeah.
The video.
Yeah.
Turn it off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You can see the layout as here with the green connections and the road going down into Birmingham. This is the sustainable urban drainage area, which is referred to in the report, and also this is the larger play area, which again is referred to in the report. Access is off Lindridge Road here, and the emergency access, which is referred to, is here, and the other connections, pedestrian cycling, are down here on that particular plan. The applicant has provided a series of house types, and I'll just quickly run through those, Mr. Chairman. These are taken from the submitted plans. I'm going the wrong way. go back, Mr. Chairman, to the layout. The report, Mr. Chairman, goes into some depth about the various issues involved. The key thing is clearly this is an allocated site in the local plan, as is referred to in the report, and therefore, in principle, there is no objection to this particular proposal. And you can also see its relationship with the Langley Zoo, 5,500 houses south of Ballindridge Road and the 170 here. The consultation responses I'll run through in a minute, Mr. Chairman, but basically there is no objection in principle. I just need to obviously update you on the matter, the one outstanding consultation response, and also on the section 106 issues which are referred to in the report. The report, Mr. Chairman, goes into some length due to the objection from Birmingham City Council. You can see that outlined in the report, and I suspect the speakers will be saying or repeating what is being said by the Birmingham City Council in their objection. I've responded to those in the report, Mr. Chairman, and it's up to members as to whether they feel that those responses carry weight or significant enough weight that they can support the proposal. In terms of the outstanding matters, Mr. Chairman, then we have now heard from the Drainage Authority, the County Council as the lead flood authority. They have no objection in principle, subject to conditions. These are standard conditions which are normally applied to outline applications, and the applicant has agreed those conditions. Secondly, in terms of open space, then you'll see on page 5I234, under the section 106 contributions, the Borough Council's Leisure and Recreation Division is looking for a contribution of just over £500,000 towards off-site enhancements. There's been quite a bit of discussion between the applicant and the Director of Leisure and Recreation on this particular issue, and you can see that on what I've said, subject to maintenance considerations, they have now agreed a figure of, I think it's 493 or 495k, so it's slightly less, but that is agreed with the Director of Leisure and Recreation. Finally, Mr. Chairman, you'll see from the report on the section 106 issues that there's the outstanding matter of the education contributions. This site sits adjacent to Sutton, adjacent to Birmingham, and therefore, apart from the County Council requesting contributions towards education, the City Council has also done so. That's outlined on page 5I/241, 11 paras 11.7 through to 11.10. In view of those particular requests, there have been an ongoing engagement between the county and city officers, Mr. Chairman. That is continuing. Though the report indicates that I will update you at the position of the meeting, I can't give you a specific update on that particular issue at the moment, to say that I know that the officers have been engaged with each other, and we're waiting for the outcome of that particular discussion before we take it forward with the applicant. The applicant is speaking, Mr. Chairman, later on, so he may be able to update you as to what his particular take on the section 106 issue is concerned. But there will be 106 contribution of some sort included in the application, included in 106, should members support the recommendation that's in front of you. The recommendation, Mr. Chairman, as you can see, is one of mine to grant planning permission, basically because of the allocation and the fact that consultations have now indicated there's no technical reason for refusal, and therefore we're now looking at the 106 issues, which again is accommodated in the recommendation in front of you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Before I invite our speakers, could you just go back to one of the earlier maps, because I'd just like members to be more aware of where the county borough boundary runs, because I think we can see a piece of land there. Where does the boundary run after this site?
This is Birmingham City Council.
Yes.
Our boundary runs down here and along here. So basically, it's just for the purposes of your answering the question, Mr. Chairman, the land in North Warwickshire is just that triangle.
And then if you were to go north and west, does our boundary run along the main road?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Members, we have two speakers tonight, the first of which is Councillor Richard Parkin from Birmingham City Council. Councillor Parkin, welcome to the meeting. Ms Ryan will explain the rules on speaking.
You'll have 3 minutes to speak, and I will start the clock when you start speaking, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute left.
Can I just check my microphone's working correctly, please?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay? Great. Yeah, so many, thank you for allowing me the time to speak. So many concerns and objections have been raised about this development that it's hard to know where to start. 3 minutes isn't enough time to list the many reasons why this ill-conceived proposal has united the residents of Sutton Redicap in opposition against it. I wrote to almost 200 properties on Lindridge Road and Springfield Road early this year. I did not receive a single message of support for the plans, and you will have seen some of the objections in my letter. I echo the comments of Royal Sutton Coldfield Town Council and the Sutton Coldfield Civic Society, who have objected to the proposal, and the scathing assessment of some of the councillors on the Birmingham City Council Planning Committee. The Town Council has criticised the proposals for breaching the North Warwickshire Local Plan. The Civic Society are fearful that the plans would create a dangerous precedent for future encroaches on the Greenbelt. And in the words of one member of the BCC Planning Committee, Taylor Wimpey has failed abysmally to produce an exemplary development. The adverse impact of this development will not be felt in North Warwickshire, but in the town of Sutton Coldfield and principally in Redicap Ward. A huge number of new homes are already coming to the area, destroying large swathes of our countryside, with the 5,500 home Langley development on the other side of the road. There will be new schools, health centres and improved highways and public transport links, but all of this is 10 to 15 years away. In the meantime, this development would create an isolated enclave in a rural setting cut off from existing residential properties with no infrastructure around it. A prospective home buyer at Lindridge Chase will have no nearby public transport links. They will have to use their cars for local journeys at a time when we're supposed to be promoting sustainable transport. They won't be able to send their kids to local schools because they will be full, and good luck with registering and getting appointments at already overstretched local surgeries. They will need to be told they will suffer up to 10 more years of this misery before they can gain access to essential services coming along with Langley. I'm deeply concerned about the impact of more vehicles on Lindridge Road. Newhall Cemetery is only 1/3 full and will continue to expand rapidly over the next 10 years. Lindridge Road is often blocked at weekends when funerals and events such as Eid pull in large numbers of visitors from all over the city. Gridlocks are commonplace, hindering access for emergency vehicles, blocking residents in on their driveways. These problems will worsen significantly if this development is approved and even more traffic is added to the area. As a Sutton Coldfield resident for over 50 years, I'm convinced this development is in the wrong place at the wrong time. If you approve these plans, you will be making a mistake. In summary, this committee needs to decide if North Warwickshire Borough Council's own interests are more important than the legitimate concerns of myself, Redicap residents, Sutton Coldfield Town Council, the Sutton Coldfield Civic Society, and councillors sitting on the Birmingham City Council Planning Committee. Please listen to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor, members, do you have any questions for our speaker? I have one. Councillor Parkin, our report tells us we've had a representation from Sutton Coldfield Town Council, from the Civic Society, yourself, and 3 letters of objection from nearby residents. You indicated that there were rather more. Would you like to send those letters of objection to us so they can be considered?
Yeah, I've had messages from residents and I've submitted many of those comments in my letter, which I wrote to you about a few months ago. So I've quoted and stated some of the comments from the residents, which you will see in my report. I've also received lots of comments on social media from residents from further afield than Redicap, actually, in Sutton Coldfield. And genuinely, I haven't seen a single comment in support, and particularly with the 5,500 home Langley developments coming along, there is a feeling that there is plenty of properties, new properties coming to our area, and this is an unnecessary and unwelcome addition to that.
But you accept, Councillor Parkin, that this is an allocated site, the same as the Langley Zoo is an allocated
Sorry, could you repeat that?
You accept that this is an allocated site within the borough plan in the same way as the Birmingham plan has allocated Langley Sue?
I'm not sure what you mean by accepted. Sorry, I'm not a planning expert, so I'm not quite sure what your terminology is here, and I'm struggling to hear you as well because my speaker unfortunately isn't very clear.
Okay. All I was trying to say, Councillor, is that this site has been allocated in our borough plan in the same way as the Langley site has been allocated in Birmingham.
Possibly, but I don't see how that's relevant.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. Councillor Riley, do you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was going to ask the councillor the same question. So obviously this is an allocated site in the North Warwickshire local plan, which means that the site has outline planning permission by virtue of the fact that it is in the local plan. So it would be very difficult, near impossible, to refuse this site as a development location. So my question to the councillor is, are there any issues that he thinks could mitigate the impact of this site besides not approving its development for housing?
I have to confess that I can't see any issues of mitigation. The impact of this development is going to create an unwelcome and unnecessary influx of vehicles and residents in an already overstretched area where you can't get a GP appointment, where the schools are full, where the roads are regularly blocked at weekends. The cemetery on Newhall Cemetery on Lindridge Road, which is only a few hundred yards away further up the junction, is rapidly expanding, and Birmingham City Council, 6 of their 9 cemeteries are full. So the traffic at the moment is horrendous, and we've had to put emergency temporary traffic measures in on certain occasions at the moment just to deal with the influx of visitors. And I don't think any of that's been taken into account with this development. And that's probably my primary concern and the primary worry of residents on Lindridge Road who are already being affected. You can read all about the impact of the Newhall Cemetery traffic on any local newspapers or Birmingham Live who've been reporting it extensively. And I'm genuinely worried that another 400, 500, 600 people living in this development the road just will not cope with it. It's already not coping today.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, do you have any other questions? There are no other questions, so thank you very much indeed, Councillor Parkin. Members, Mr. Joe Bennett has indicated, I'm presuming, gentlemen, that is it just you, Mr. Bennett, or are your colleagues going to have?
Just me, Mr. Chair, but my clients are here, so if there are any questions of technical nature, and they may be able to.
Thank you. Just because we like to vary things here, Mrs. Ryan will explain the rules on public speaking.
Mr. Bennett, we've got 3 minutes to speak. I'll start the clock when you start speaking, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute.
Good evening, members, ladies and gentlemen. As has already been rightly pointed out, this site is allocated for housing within the local plan. By virtue of that allocation, the principle of residential development has been established, and in fact, my clients have had numerous complex expression of interest in purchasing on the site. Policy H6 is the allocation policy, and it sets out 2 main requirements. First refers to the delivery, access, and development of the site being linked to Langley to the south. The officer's report sets out in considerable detail how that's being met. Within the site, several footpaths connect to Lindridge. Footpath is promoted along the side frontage. This will enable future connections to be made with flexibility in do so. Further development has been designed so the proposed footpaths and open space aligns with the master plan. And whilst Birmingham initially objected, Warwickshire and Birmingham Highways have no objections to the proposals. The access was subsequently. Development would in no way prejudice Langley, shown through the improved access. We appreciate that in terms of delivery, development will come forward ahead of Langley. But Langley is making progress, and the Section 106 negotiations are well underway after committee were minded to approve in 2022. Ultimately, all parcels of an urban extension can't come forward at once, and someone has to start first. And in mitigation, Taylor Wimpey are proposing a footpath length of Lindridge Road shown on the screen to enable people to walk nearby Sutton. Birmingham made design comments. The proposed density and heights match the Langley parameters plan. The number of units proposed here is higher than the indicative application figure. This has been achieved whilst meeting open space, density and all related requirements for separation. This is a detailed application. Taylor Wimpey would commence as soon as possible, providing a welcome boost to housing delivery on an allocated site, fending off speculative development. Whilst Birmingham suggested they would opt for a different elevation or treatment, we've worked with you to ensure the design is accessible and the site is within North Warwickshire. Now shown on the CGI images, dwellings will be attractive and reflect the local vernacular. The second element of policy H6 refers mostly to drainage and sewage treatment plan, the latter now being decommissioned. Drainage terms both the lead local authority and Birmingham's drainage team have objections. There is no doubt that policy allocation policy H6. Development calls the rest of the local plan too, delivering a good mix of dwellings to accommodate a wider range of requirements, EV charging points, areas, and drainage features with specially designed water quality and wetland ecology features. Development includes 71 affordable homes, a high proportion of shared ownership units, the identified requirement. Taylor Wimpey are providing well over £1 million in financial contributions for parks, education, footpaths and guest facilities, for example. Finally, we'd like to thank officers and members for their positive engagement during the application. Taylor Wimpey have taken on board the constructive comments provided in terms of additional tree planting and respective design. The ability to make plans on the table and discuss proactive suggestions has been refreshing from the final proposals for your better. We agree with your officers' assessment.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions? Councillor Hayfield and Councillor Phillips.
Listening to the councillor from Birmingham talking about infrastructure and stuff, a family with school-aged children wants to buy one of your houses, which you build, and they're not quite good. But I say to you, well, okay, so where can my kids go to school? What will you tell them?
So the position on the education is one going, and there's been lots of
There's no solution.
Well, there is a provisional solution that's been put, which is that there may be a bus put on, and Taylor Wimpey have agreed that in principle, but further conversations are ongoing as to whether it may be more appropriate for some of the money to instead go to Birmingham in view of the proximity, and schooling could be accessed there instead. We are aware that many residents, and this is directly from the education team themselves, many people within Sutton nearby the development actually travel to school within Warwickshire, so they're already making journeys out of Birmingham to Warwickshire. But should children access schooling in Birmingham, we have to find it.
Just want to follow up again, because although this is in North Warwickshire, people who have the houses there won't necessarily feel they're part of North Warwickshire because they're part of the sort of right tucked into the existing conurbation. They'll be looking that way, I guess, for a lot of their services, their dentists, their doctors, and everything else, because everything else will require a substantial journey into North Warwickshire to go and find them. So are you confident that the infrastructure, the social infrastructure exists to look after your potential new residents?
Yes, I am, and beyond the examples you've referenced, my clients have already done some engagement work with a nearby parish, and there have been discussions as to whether there would be a parish notice board and events that could take place on the site. Space has actually been left following consultation with the church to have a square 3x3 marquee where events could take place. Only very localised events, but community building exercises. And part of the design ethos one proposal has been to make it look like a North Warwickshire development. We understand it's an unusual site, it is an allocated site, and we're in the process of agreeing suitable officers' contributions to make the development in those terms.
Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, it was on the charging. Selling houses for. Even making sure that if a house has a car, if it's a charging, you're not going to abandon it without
electric charging. Absolutely, they provide that's a good.
Councillor Jarvis,
Thanks, Chair. I've heard a lot of talk about education, what may happen or talk about it. What will happen? Because we all know that all our local schools are full. And to put these amount of houses without any definite plan, and I'm not saying it's Taylor Wimpey, might need engagement with the educational authorities as well. But it's all right saying a maybe, or that they will talk to them. What is going to happen? There's 178 houses. If they generate, I don't know, 50 or 60 kids, where are they going to go? Because the local schools are all full. And the other part, and I know this is nothing that you can rectify, but the 106 contributions are all retrospective. So if they say there's £500,000 for a school, they don't get it until 70–80% of the houses are sold. So it's effectively bolting the door after the horse was bolted. The kids are already there. And my concern is that the schools are already full. What is going to happen, not what might happen or what the promises are, is what will happen. Because we've seen it off other developments as well. And I wouldn't say it's development. I think it's a generic thing that houses generate requirements. And I won't say anything about surgeries, but probably that's the same sort of scenario. That it's all retrospective. Something has got to be done for when those are in. Because the first people that occupy them, there will be no facility. End of. Jeff?
Yeah, we agree there will be an impact. That's the first thing to say. And that will be wrapped up in the 6 agreement. Where so I think members can be rest assured that money will be provided to local schools to secure the legal agreement. What needs to be finalised is exactly which schools that goes towards. Just as a latest position, the figures that we're talking are 700–800,000 £800,000. So there are substantial contributions. What I would say is that locally, the nearest primary school is actually within Birmingham. That does have capacity. Some of the schools locally within North Warwickshire actually do have capacity too, not all of them, I can see, and that's why a contribution would be provided. Jeff, myself, my clients, we've had meetings already with the Education Authority to discuss how best for that money to be divvied up, so to speak. Our client's position is that we're happy to pay a contribution, and it needs to be worked out exactly where that money goes to. That's something that will be ongoing. It's built into the recommendation. The commission won't be granted until that gets reached in a resolution. So if no agreement is reached, so I hope that makes reassurance.
Would that agreed payment be upfront to allow the schools to be developed before the kids arrive? The money paid retrospectively when the kids are already there?
It's usually stepped.
Yeah,
so
it's usually retrospective.
I wouldn't say retrospective. I think it's it's staged in steps, so that a certain amount of money is paid in the early stages, and then a bit more in reflection of the fact that all kids aren't going to be moving from day.
School development would happen. And I'll just cite one local one. That's, I think the development's about £2 million to accept the extra kids around this area. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Grosvenor.
Sorry, just noting that although yes, there are some surplus places there at reception, and the year 7 surpluses don't seem to be sufficient. So we seem to have a discrepancy between what we think is the pound numbers of the schools and what's actually going to be available to parents at the time. So I don't know if you want to respond to that, because you just said that there were some availability, but I don't think that's consistent. And obviously, if you've got a large population moving into now, it's not just reception that you just look at. There doesn't seem to be the rest of the availability in the pound figures. And in the year 7 surpluses, there's certainly, and I realise it builds over time, but there doesn't seem to be significant year 7s to move families into schools. So they've got that seamless transition. But actually, one of the concerns that I wanted to ask about is air quality, which we've had today being so significant with the A38 and the I can't imagine many families wishing to cross either of those roads to take their children to school. So I think that, you know, we are right that we were looking at Birmingham to provide children, and those pound figures don't necessarily support that there will be places for those children to attend. But also then you've kind of the situation whereby we've got other services, and environmental health is one of them that will be underneath significant roads and significant infrastructure. With families living by very, very busy roads. And if you wanted to respond to the concerns that way.
I mean, starting on the education point, I said that there was some capacity, there is some capacity. I acknowledge that there is, and there will also be some impact, and we've acknowledged that we will need to mitigate that impact through 106 payments. I don't think that's in dispute in any shape or form. And we're confident that we come forward with an agreed solution, and that contribution is likely to be substantially in recognition of the size of the development. It's an ordinary part of the process, and that discussion is ongoing. In terms of air quality, we've produced a full and detailed air quality assessment through the planning application. That has been assessed by your environmental health officers, and they've provided no objection comments in respect to that.
Councillor Parsons.
Actually, no, I think Councillor Godwin has made points. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Fowler and then Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I actually share the concerns of members on board, certainly on housing, the air quality. You've mentioned, I think, solar panels, and in a look towards solar tiles instead of solar panels on the houses. So interested as well, particularly with Linwood Road. If I recall, no buses at all that run along that road. And talked about members have talked about school and health, etc. With this potential site, then forthcoming is going to be, which I think has already gone through, which was alluded by the chairman, the other side, which is called Springfield Road. That side is already allocated for quite a lot of housing to come. I mean, a lot more than this proposal. So I've got, like Councillor Hayfield and others, I've got grave concerns that even though there's this 106 agreement money coming forward, I'm not quite convinced at this stage that projecting with child places, Sutton Coldfield of North Warwickshire, that we're going to be able to cope with the infrastructure. I need convincing that we're going to be able to bring forward that infrastructure that will deal with that, and I'm not sure that this actually echoes that.
I mean, in terms of solar tiles, I'll admit that that's a fairly new point on me. I know that Tesla and others are working on solar tiles as replacements of solar panels. I don't believe we necessarily be proposing them on this development. In terms of the wider point, in terms of the contributions have been put forward by the respective educational authority are substantial, and we are in agreement that a contribution needs to be made. I think what I've already mentioned really is in terms of where that money will end up, but the difficulty that we've got at the moment clearly our clients twice. They can't pay for children to go to school in Birmingham, and they can't pay for them to go to school in North Warwickshire as well. Initially, the position looked like all of them go to North Warwickshire, and that's on Warwickshire, I should say, the educational. And the basis that would be the case is that they have a legal requirement to provide school places. So if those children are refused in Birmingham, then those places will be taken up in Warwickshire, and Warwickshire would have a requirement to do so. There is, though, the argument that Birmingham have put forward, which is, well, be that as it may, our schools are nearer, and schools are going to come online within Langley. So what looks quite likely at the moment is that a certain proportion of the money would go to Birmingham, and a certain proportion of the money would that proportion would have to. But the total figure in itself will remain the same broadly. It's agreed that X number of children of a certain age will be from the development, and they will need school. And that figure is broadly around just under £1,000 that I've mentioned. Jeff might want to come to the position of the council, but our position is that we agree a contribution needs to be paid, and it will be for the two educational authorities to where that money is.
Just before the chairman comes back in again, I did mention about transportation, because if I recall, going up and down there's no bus stops or any public transport that goes around that area.
Thank you very much. We are providing a pedestrian footpath, 2 metre wide pedestrian footpath that will take you down to Springfield. There are services, facilities, and the bus services. Less than 10 minutes, an easy walk. So whilst they may not pass the site necessarily initially, that will be provided within Sutton nearby. What I should also mention is that road is the speed limit is being reduced to 30 miles an hour. Taylor will be providing the funding in order for that to happen, and the access and the highway proposals have been approved. Detailed highways submission has been made to them in respect of the access and associated works. So that is all being addressed with it's an unusual cross-boundary issue, but that is it.
Councillor Warren?
I noticed that there are 2 play parks. You know how important they are for children's development, particularly after the pandemic. What reassurance can you give us that play parks will actually be built?
Absolutely, my client's full intention to do so. They would be approved on the layout as well. So if there was an attempt not to build them, to add housing onto those locations, that would be a serious breach. It's obviously not a course of action seek to carry out. There are 2 play areas. One's a lap slightly smaller, southeastern corner of the site, and then there's a bigger leaf in the northern part. So at the substantial contributions of around £500,000 also being paid for the betterment of parks and more formalised other open spaces, particularly
Councillor Phillips?
Yes, it's just the school placements. If we said start building now.
First occupation would probably be around this time next year.
Councillor Jones?
Chair, still going on the education theme, is that yes, it seems that there's a discussion between Birmingham City Council and Warwickshire County Council of who has what chunk of the money. Ones that have got the statutory requirements for education, as this site is in Warwickshire, ones that have the statutory requirements for education is Warwickshire.
Birmingham have no statutory rights on that site for education. So, you know, is it giving money, or could it be giving money to Birmingham City Council of this Warwickshire development, but it's Warwickshire that's got the statutory requirement to supply the education?
There's definitely a question there.
Yeah, I think clearly then there'll have to be a provision within the 106 agreement in order to cover that eventuality. Clearly, that's not a scenario they want to promote. What has been tentatively suggested is that there may be money that would go to North Warwickshire, and that would be written in through the 106 agreement. But if that wasn't to happen, that money could then, because children will go to Birmingham, then that money could move to Birmingham instead, because obviously that unmet need has not been passed to Birmingham. If it was the case that all of the money would go to Birmingham, I don't think that this would certainly don't see that would be the outcome. But let's just say that that is the solution. It may be the case that the site is effectively taken out of Warwickshire or Warwickshire as far as education is provided, and therefore Birmingham would have their legal duty to provide those education places. So there are several ways. There are several ways that this could be resolved.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. Initially, I'd like to sort of apologise that we kept you waiting. Certainly given you in terms of questions since you got into the show. I'm sure you've got the genuinely is a concern about infrastructure. Recommendation in front of the board, we are minded to grant planning permission. And I accept the response earlier on that you'd be, so I'm not quite sure, occupying the first house in a year?
Yeah.
I'm just not clear in my head where the time scale is from here, because I would have thought a minded to consent, and we'll go through this once ground as we go. Isn't a formal grant of consent, saying we're intending to. So how quickly will you be able to move forward in terms of determining what the terms and conditions of the agreement are? Particularly, I have to say, in my mind, as well as health and education provision.
Well, first on the health, because that's the easiest question I'll get out of the way, is that health has been agreed, the provision towards the NHS contribution, that's agreed. In terms of the date that's been mentioned, that would be on the basis of agreeing Section 106 within a relatively short time frame of the next couple of months. To start on the side, we'd perhaps be looking at something like September. So, but you're absolutely right, Chair, that that happen if no resolution is achieved on the education point. So the development will only begin at that point, and if that takes a while, then completions will be delayed by a commensurate period. So we were actually hoping to get a response from Warwickshire today, and Jeff and I were hoping that you might want to have an update today. That hasn't happened. I understand but we're looking to get started as soon as possible. Taylor has a detailed application and it needs to get started on site as soon as they can start the residents.
It strikes me as incredibly wasteful and on a bus to bring children backwards and forwards. So, better solutions than that?
Well, the alternative is that money could be, and that would mean that the requirement for bus travel is potentially removed. What I would say is that, sort of touched on earlier, being made aware by Warwickshire that actually a lot of residents of Birmingham accessing schools within and movement out of Birmingham into North Warwickshire is already taking place. And I say that to put some context in the sense that people are clearly already driving or accessing buses to schools within your district. And therefore it's quite possible that residents of this side may like to go to those schools too, be that because of their Ofsted record. And I think we have to cater for the reality of what's actually going to take place. So whilst in theory the legal requirement may be to go to Warwickshire, if the judgment of members and of the educational authorities that move not going to take place, and actually it'd be better for the spaces to be funded within Langley or within Birmingham, then our clients would be happy to agree to that, provided it meets the silk tests. They're reasonably flexible in terms of how the money is divided.
When would your clients ideally be looking forward to detail? Accepting that tonight. The recommendation was only.
If they could be promised if they could have the decision tomorrow, they'd snap your hands off. Clearly, that's not going to happen. So the honest answer is as soon as possible. We're keen to start on site as soon as we can, and we'd be looking to submit the details pertaining to the drainage matters, kind of detail. Start on site as soon as possible. Our clients, for instance, will ask for archaeology information, and rather than waiting for the decision, they've already been on site with supervision of the campus archaeology team to matters that have been issues. But it's just as an indication that our clients are keen to progress matters as soon as physically possible.
Thank you. And Councillor,
I was going to say, I think we've been, like you said, quite robust, but I think we've been quite unfair in one respect, the way we're asking the questions. They build houses. They don't provide school places, but they do provide the money. The two authorities provide the school places are obviously negotiating with each other, and the money will go whichever way it sorts itself. I first thought that this site, I thought to myself, should be in Birmingham rather than over here. But I'm impressed with Birmingham because Birmingham seems to squeeze a lot more money out of things than we do. If I look at Wharton at the moment,
just check, Councillor.
No, that's why I was going to wait.
No. If you've got a question,
the point I'm making, I think we've been unfair to him. He's not Taylor Wimpey. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude. It's not Taylor Wimpey's fault. You're asked to provide the money for the school places. It's the authority, education authority, should place that to sort that. And I understand Birmingham seems to have done a much better job of it. I've just go back to what's happened in Wharton. Half the houses of the 357 houses are already built and occupied, and we haven't done anything for the schools there at the moment. And we're only going to supply on 550,000 on 350 houses. They're getting £2 million on 174 houses. I think they're much better at robbing people in Birmingham than we are. And it's up to other authorities that we should be beating up over getting the infrastructure in place. Not poor old Bill, whose mates left him abandoned here to take on. He certainly looks like he's answered. Are we being unfair to you? I think is the question.
No, I appreciate the scrutiny with which you give your applications. Although I would just say is that I do agree with you in the sense that it's not necessarily Taylor Wimpey to give your guidance on where the should be provided. And that really is for the two educational authorities to bottom out. And as I've said a few times now, we are happy to pay the money. We've agreed in principle to paying that money. It's just in terms of where that.
Right then, by the beer on the way.
Satisfied. Structure will be. Councillor Powell.
Thank you. I'm just going to put my head over there with my environmental and climate change hat on, if you don't mind. Because looking at it, I'm just thinking, well, we've got the Wildlife Trust and the Thames Valley Wetlands. Just thinking any potential 106 towards helping with that, as you talked about the ecological matters. And I just welcoming any particular help for those people that work so hard on our wildlife and Thames Valley.
If there was a request for contributions, that would have been considered. I don't think funding has been put forward. What I would say is that within the attenuation basin, I've seen something like this before, but essentially it's divided into 6 different areas. 3 of those areas dedicated to water quality improvements, so to remove the silt and other sediment from the discharge to the brook. The other aspect of the drainage feature is that it would have ecology wetland areas to provide new wildlife. The development makes a slight habitat net gain overall, which I think is quite impressive considering this site. But it also provides a quite an enormous 300% hectare gain as well. The development's been assessed by ecologists and has been in numerous ecology surveys provided within submission.
For your answer, thank you, Chair.
I was waiting for the discussion. I haven't got a question.
Oh, marvellous.
When the discussion comes up.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, members? Mr. Bennett, you certainly thank you very much. Mr. Brown, before we go into the conversation, I'd just like to go back to the recommendation and be clear that I'm understanding this, because normally when we see a minded to grant, that's when it goes off to the Secretary of State, I think. What are we doing here? Are we simply saying that yes, subject to 1, 2, 3 and B? Because I suspect members are deeply concerned about infrastructure provision. And the issue of in principle, to an extent, has already been determined from the allocation of the site in the borough plan. But where are we going? This will come back to the board. It will be determined by officers upon resolution of recommendation B.
There's a couple of points there, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, the recommendation was written on the understanding that there would have been an agreement between Warwickshire and Birmingham for the time of this meeting. That's not happened, and therefore that has to be taken away. However, the recommendation to support the grant of the planning permission remains. Recommendation B is in the absence of agreement between the two education authorities that comes back to the board. I'm quite happy, in view of the discussion tonight, in that members be informed of the outcome of the discussions between Birmingham and Warwickshire. Now, if that means a deferral, that means a deferral. But I think the applicant will certainly want an indication from the board as to whether or not the board itself is minded to support. And I put that in terms of grant planning commission, which is effectively the same thing.
Is it? Minded support is the same as granting.
No,
Doesn't sound like it.
no, it's a principle of in it, and there's details that will need to be clarified, which is that B.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Thank you. Yeah, I was actually going to say something similar to Councillor Humphreys and thank our speaker for his valiant attempt to answer questions that are really not concerned. And I think our questions have indicated our lack of confidence in both the analysis of the need, particularly for education and health, and the suggestion of the solutions. And I absolutely agree that we have to, well, I'm quite happy to be minded to support, or however we express it, but we really do need to defer until we've got that 106 and that infrastructure sorted out. And I would say, I know that it is between Birmingham and Warwickshire, but I think North Warwickshire ought to be involved. We need to be really reassured that this infrastructure is going to work for us. And some of the analysis of what's required as far as school places are concerned and the current state of our schools, I would lead to quite a lot of reassurance. And so I would suggest that we as well, so that we can be confident when this comes back that the infrastructure is going to support us. And you know, and if somebody needs to go to Birmingham, well, why? And be reassured that it will happen. And busing children, particularly primary school children and young primary school, to school is not in my solution. So yeah, so if you want a proposal that we are important, whatever Graham thinks is the right word, but we will defer until we get those assurances. Then I'm happy to
Councillor Hayfield.
Yes, there's quite a lot here, isn't there? first of all, I love the idea they're going to build, Birmingham's going to build 5,000 houses just next to it, but object so strongly to 170 something just on the side of it. I think a bit of a cheat there, frankly. That said, I come back to the point that the people who are going to be residents there are going to feel part of Birmingham rather than feel part of Warwickshire. And we shouldn't be too precious, therefore, in trying to insist that they're going to be Warwickshire children, and therefore we have to find them Warwickshire schools. And therefore we want Section 106 money to be able to bust them all over the damn borough and try and find them places. It'd be far better, I think, if we would sort of basically give this bit to Birmingham and say, you sort it. We have the residents, you have the rates, you have the, because they're going to go that way to try and find their shopping, they're going to try to their surgeries, their everything else. Leisure facilities. They don't want to get on a bus, come to Addison, use a leisure facility in Addison, are they, for the same? I just feel that we need to be very focused on any 106 money being for the benefit of those residents there and not necessarily for the benefit of other Warwickshire facilities and things. That are rubbing their hands and thinking, oh, some cash going. So I think there's a lot of work to be done yet. In terms of building on that site, absolutely, yes, it's an allocated site, and I'll support the minded to get on with it and develop it. But I think Birmingham and Warwickshire need their heads knocking together and coming up with some solutions that are actually going to be to the benefit of the residents there, rather than sort of, there, my residents, I want the money. No. We shouldn't be. We should be more relaxed about it at the moment. Did that make sense?
Oh, it does. Thank you, former chairman of the Education Committee at Warwickshire County Council.
Well, exactly, yes. I did do education in Warwickshire for years, and we do bust them all over the place. Sticking young kids in buses and taking them on half-hour journeys or 40-minute journeys to back doesn't make any sense whatsoever. If there's a school in Birmingham just up the road within walking distance, they should be going to that one rather than being shipped in a bus to Coleshill.
Subject to parental choice. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. 4 issues to be done. And I totally support everything that colleagues have said in terms of the conditions around and the 106 around education. I think there are 2 other matters to be considered in education. The first one is a highways matter. So I'm intrigued to read Section 6 and find that less than £10,000 have been allocated to highways safety matters. We've heard tonight that all of these residents will travel onto Lindridge Road, and anybody that knows this area know that Lindridge Road joins Holly Lane, which then joins the A446. Residents will also, or members of the committee will also know that not half a mile away is a junction of Grove Lane with the A446. And up until a year ago, Grove Lane was the most dangerous junction anywhere in Warwickshire, having had 5 fatal accidents. So I read with interest the report and its considerations about the highway in the specific locality of the development site. But what I don't see in the report is any confidence that Highways Authority or indeed Birmingham City Council have considered the route that residents of this site, future residents of the site, will use, which is Lindridge to Holly to the A446, which will take them to junction 9 of the 42 or onto the A38 and the A5. So I have deep concerns about the safety of the road junction of Holly Lane with the A446. I read again, the second point is I read again the conditions that proposals for 106 on section 6, and with desperation I note that Warwickshire Police, Warwickshire Fire and Rescue have not made any application. We already know from local experience that Warwickshire Police are not providing a policing service in North Warwickshire that we would all want. And to accept an extension of 178 houses in Warwickshire without any proposal for growth in service is nothing short of unacceptable. My third point concerns paragraph 10.1, which is the local plan. And I read again that we have an application here for a site which is allocated in the local plan, houses. And this matter isn't specific to this site only, but we have a local plan allocation of 140 houses, and yet we have a planning application for 178. And it's my concern that we are having developers consistently increasing the housing allocations that are determined by having understood the formula that the local plan was developed on. I am again concerned that our plan is being taken advantage of and no real justification is being submitted to increase these numbers. And that is a comment about this site, and it is a comment about other sites as well. The final point, Chair, is around policy LP15, which is the archaeological policy in the local plan. And I know that this site has got Bronze Age burnt mounds on it. I see there are some excellent conditions proposed, but it's just a request as to whether I couldn't have some more information about the nature of burnt mounds, because not only this site, but every HS2 site has identified a significant number of burnt mounds, and from what I understand, nothing is understood about the nature of these mounds, indeed the settlements that cause them. So it's a point of interest, but it's also a serious consideration around the heritage and history of North Warwickshire. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Chair. I have to agree with an awful lot of what's been said, and absolutely agree with Councillor Hayfield. I think we have got to be a lot more laid back about this. This is a development, and education will be a combination, and it will be sorted out. Build a housing estate, the houses don't appear overnight. Children obviously you have to be able to cater whatever children do. Education authorities are well versed in doing this, and by and large they succeed. I think there's one council that managed to mess up their modelling spectacularly recently, I can't remember, but anyway, normally get this right. There's 174, 178 houses here. 178 houses does not warrant a new school. It doesn't generate a new school or anything like. So that is how it's got to be done. It's going to have to be done. Negotiation between Warwickshire and Birmingham. And it is really good to see this concern about the infrastructure here. But of course, there are those of us who are a bit near this development do feel the concerns about the infrastructure that's been far larger numbers. Don't see quite this level of debate. So, no, this is not our concern, but we do need to let the educational authorities get on with their job, which they will do. Developers get on with their job, which they are doing. We have to ask questions, we have to look at it, but we do not have to get totally issue of this development. It is a small development in a sense. There are bigger developments much nearer to home.
I think in the spirit of trying to be more relaxed about it, echo everything, and echo pretty much all those opinions. So the academic problem, that's going to be 2 academic cycles for the education system. Sort itself out. As for mission creep, housing size, that's a problem we're always going to keep increasing. We have to really decide we're just going to toss the local plan out, or just grin and bear it and work around it. That's what it boils down to, and I'm inclined to vote for it. Most of what's been said.
Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you. I'm not minded to be relaxed about providing education for these families. The sufficiency numbers that we've been given are all in North Warwick for the Colts Hill School. That is the statutory obligation, and I think that it needs a firmer, more uptight possible agreement between Birmingham and education in order to kind of make sure that these children can access a reasonable education Ideally, as you said, without being bussed backwards and forwards for half an hour to the school. And I also think that there's a risk here that, see, the Coleshill School is mentioned, which already doesn't have sufficient places in secondary. And I think there is a serious risk that if the Coleshill School isn't supported to provide for these places, that we have a statutory obligation to provide, and there is no formal agreement with Birmingham in order to provide those places, that these children are left in limbo. And that is, I think, the concerning situation here if we don't have the agreements. And without those agreements to provide for the education and obviously the health code supposedly in place. But I think without those, and in mind of the extra 5,000 houses, which are also going to be compounding that situation on the Birmingham doorstep, which are kind of bordering these, that I think there is a significant risk to the education of the new residents, which I wouldn't be minded to support until we have clarity. Thank you.
Councillor Midley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not that relaxed about infrastructure delivery either. I am concerned, and I've listened to everybody here, but it seems sometimes to be out of our power. We're leaving it to other organisations to try and deliver. People that are going to live on this site, what's our build out? Is our build out 50 homes? What's the build out of the 5,500 that's going to provide the other infrastructure for 10 years? So how do we leave those people in those communities? Do we leave them in a building site for 10 years with very little infrastructure? And how is that brought to the table and brought to need people that actually occupy these homes? And I hear what the Parsons says about we've got to be a bit more relaxed. A lot of stakes coming into our local plan. We really have to ensure that education, transport, roads really got their act together, and we really know what we're saying and what we're delivering. So when people come into a home, they actually know what they're going to expect within the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Again, we're at the mercy, aren't we, of the development of the policies.
Councillors, I think I knew what you were intending to say, but I guess you want to clarify it. Yeah.
So I was just trying to brief because I've dragged on for long enough. As I say, Echo is ever at the mercy of road developments. We have the most dangerous roads. We have limited school spaces, but we have to take more houses. We have to. It's inevitable. We can't affect that here. And the only way we're going to get better roads, the only way we're going to get bigger schools and more schools is to build more houses around. It's the only way it's going to happen, isn't it? No one's going to just come along and go, here's an empty school, fill it over the next 20 years. We have to build some houses and create the need.
Yeah, members, I know you're all desperate. The applicant has made a response. You have questions and comments on the application. Carry on. Councillor Wright.
I withdraw my suggestion. I was only going to support Councillor Phillips' proposals about local plan applications and highways improvements.
So you're withdrawing it, but you said it anyway. Mr. Brown, unusually you've been distinctly quiet. Is there anything you would like to say?
You're still connected.
I haven't been invited, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm inviting you, Mr. Brown.
For a short amount of time. Exactly. Just to pick up on a couple of points of Councillor Riley. RP15 archaeology, a lot of work already, such that the county archaeologist is now comfortable with the development. The site's been evaluated, it's been trial chenched, and the report has all gone to the archaeologist. We can get you information about that, but the current man is there. Deposit that will be made to the county archaeologist, and that's the reason why the conditions may alter as a consequence of that. So that's not an issue. In terms of the highways issue, and clearly both Birmingham and Warwickshire as have not objected to this application, and Birmingham have actually road west side of the site, and they did not object to the application for the access arrangements Warwickshire side. Warwickshire have not objected to this. They had wanted off-site improvements at highway junctions. They should have asked for it. They have not. They have asked for safety issues and other matters, but they have not asked for off-site improvements. As simple as that. As far as the police and fire service are concerned, they were consulted when this application came in over 12 months ago. Absolutely no response from them whatsoever. Okay, reminders go out for obvious reasons, but no response from them, either individually or through their infrastructure requirements in one letter. Absolutely nothing has come through on. Maybe the county council members sitting around the table may wish to take that up. In terms of numbers, then the overall housing requirement from the local plan is a minimum. It's not an exact number. And the report also explains the situation here, why the numbers on this particular site have increased. The development constraints on the site, in order to make the site viable, led to increased numbers on the site. Simple as that. But they've also done that with respect to the ecology with the tractor drainage and connections and linkages into the land lease too. So therefore, in fact, it's a balanced approach which has to be taken on all sites. When a local plan allocation is undertaken or set out in a local plan, and it's based on a plan like that. Okay, there's lots more to it than that, but basically it's not a density issue. We do not go into details about development costs, severe, unusual costs this site has got because of. Appreciate it's a stacked site, which is a very unusual cost. Therefore, the developer, in this particular case, has increased numbers just to make it viable, bearing in mind all the other Section 106 issues. So you will find that allocations, planning applications on allocated sites do alter when a developer starts looking at it and how they want to develop the site in that particular way. And then the final comment, Mr. Chairman, is I agree. We are where we are with the 6 contributions. We're not the infrastructure delivery agency, and we have to work within the county council's requirements, Birmingham City Council's requirements. It happens all the time as members are on allocated sites. It's going to come up when we deal with Roby's Lane because we're next door to Tamworth, and there's going to be a cross-border issue there, which there is. But on that particular site, Staffordshire and Warwickshire agreed a solution. And I suspect very strongly that Birmingham and Warwickshire will agree a solution here. Now, then that will obviously have to come back. That may or may not have to come back to members. But as I was saying, there are various options here. Either 106, as I think one of the members said, could be that the money comes to Warwickshire and then it's transferred if things don't happen to Birmingham. There could be 2 separate 6 agreements, one with Birmingham, one with Warwickshire. Maybe that is the solution, or it may be one that comes to Warwickshire along the lines of primary for Birmingham, secondary for Warwickshire. So there are various options that are outstanding. It's up to Warwickshire and come forward with those proposals. If they don't agree, then it has to come back to us. I agree with that point, to make a determination, but the determination must be based on whether that 106 is still compliant. In other words, it's compliant with the statutory regulations, and also clearly if the developer agrees to that. What I don't want to happen, and I'm sure the developer will happen, is for there to be a judicial review, either by Birmingham or Warwickshire, on the decision that we make on the 106 contribution.
Councillor Ryan?
Thank you to Mr. Brown for the clarification of those points. If you don't mind, I may just respond. Yes, thank you about burnt mounds. If you can recall, the request was for information about what burnt mounds are, recognising that there are conditions in this report and recognising the fact that it has been done to satisfaction in terms of this application. Number 2, in terms of highways matters, I note the fact that highways have only looked at the issues that are listed here, but my frustration again is that the highway review does not appear to be in the greater context of the environment that highway matters and highway risks will be raised in. Again, I voiced my frustration at County Council Highways and this forum before. And again, I urge my colleagues on the board, we have to, again, every time we see applications, challenge the highways assessments because they don't fit into the context of local understanding about those risks. Finally, in the housing numbers, I'm dismayed if the local plan numbers are minimum numbers. Because I accept that this site might not be economically developable. That was not a consideration of the local plan when we allocated this site. It was that this site was allocated for the houses, accepting that there might have been some growth. Growth of 170 sounds significant to me.
I suspect Councillor Hayfield, being an expert in Burke Mounds, will have some information to you. Once he's done that, if you don't mind, members, I'll draw this proposal. Councillor Hayfield.
I was going to say that for clarity, my comment about being relaxed about it was being in the sort of relaxed about the head-to-head approach between Birmingham and Warwickshire over who was getting what in terms of 106 allocations. People will vote with their feet. If people who live in houses there will choose where they want to go to school. They haven't got to go to a Warwickshire school. They haven't got to go to a Birmingham school. They will choose like any other child does anywhere else. They'll choose which school they go to. And even things like, sensible approach to these things. Bins, emptying bins. Are we going to go? Well, they're Warwickshire residents, so we're going to send a freighter all the way up there to empty their bins and come back out again? Or are we going to do a deal with Birmingham or something to sort that bit out? These are the sort of practical considerations, and any of these developments that are going to be sitting on the boundaries or close to the boundaries between authorities. And in terms of burnt mounds, Chairman, I can assure you they're one of the most boring things in. They're just little mounds of burnt stones. I mean, nothing to get excited about. I mean, I'm sure there are people who get excited about it, but I'm certainly not one of them.
Members, I think we've had a very wide discussion. And, I generally take the point that time all of us are making any statements not intended to be taken. So let's take all of that in context. I'll just draw you back to the application. This is an allocated residential site. And as our planning officer said, there is no planning objection in principle. I haven't heard anybody actually, except Councillor Gosling had reservations, but I haven't heard anybody say there is an objection of this site. The way in our applications with the adopt
Margaret make a proposal.
So
Margaret made a proposal, Chair.
I've listened to you. As I was going on to say, about half an hour ago, Councillor Bell suggested a way. I think, Councillor Bell, what you were in reality trying to say was
what you did was
we can talk about being minded to grant consent. I think members have reasonably shown that they have detailed concern about how the development will be finalised. I absolutely have heard what the applicant is saying in terms of the timescale that they would like to. So I would suggest as a way forward is we follow Councillor Bell's suggestion that we are minded to grant consent, subject to the completion of 1 back to the board for consideration. I accept entirely saying, Councillor Bell, but there are big issues here which are beyond competency, but it is not unreasonable for members to wish to be assured that there is a viable plan. At the minute, and I agree, everybody thought that might have been this morning, as we stand, there isn't. I see no reason whatsoever why Birmingham City Council and Warwick County Council, with the assistance of our officers, can't come to that within the next 4 weeks. And so I would, if you're proposing that, I'll certainly second it, that we are minded to grant consent. Think of what the applicant is. That we want an assurance that the details in terms of appropriate, which I think the one is that this can, accepting a grant, we are minded to grant that tonight. next meeting. Councillor Ryan.
I support that proposal. And I'm just thinking through the challenges of safety, which obviously as we know, safety is a material planning consideration for all applications. Is there something that we could also agree tonight about inviting police and fire and rescue in to meet with chair or opposition spokesman, just to understand why they are not putting applications in?
I think that's a very fair comment. If you like, I'll take that as a second resolution, apply to the granting of this application, but as a secondary point. If there are more comments, members been proposed and seconded that is minded to grant consent, subject to the agreement of a 106 agreement, as it says in 1, that be referred to the next meeting of the board. Happy with that? So those in favour? Any against? Any abstention? And secondly, that we invite Warwickshire Police and Fire and any other associated statutory providers to meet with the authority to discuss their procedures in respect of listing section 106. Proposed by Councillor Ready, seconded by Councillor. Are you seconding, Councillor?
Second.
Those in favour?
Better services.
Those against? Thank you very much. Gentlemen, that's a long time. I hope I'm bearing with us for that, but I hope they give me the word. Members, we now move on to the next application. I would say if you are desperate to go to the ship shop, you have no need to stay with us for the rest of the meeting. We'll move on to agenda item number 6, which is a tree preservation order at 81 Auster Road, Warden. Mr. Brown, I hope you haven't anything to add to your report.
No, Mr. Chairman, recommendations.
Move it, Chair.
Second. Those in favour?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Another one.
A tree preservation order in respect of Chase Cottage, Chase Lane, Mansell.
Again, Mr. Chairman, just to confirm action already taken.
Mr. Brown, you ordinary block out signatures on both of these you haven't. Are they not secret enough?
I'll follow it up, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. So it's being recommended for agreement. Those in favour? Thank you very much. That's carried by the virtue of the Local Government Act 1974. I now propose that we move into private and confidential session.
Second.
Those in favour? Thank you very much. That's